Hello friends, in this video I will talk about one-tailed and two-tailed test. Usually we have confusion that when we need to frame the hypothesis for one-tailed and when we need to formulate the hypothesis for two-tailed test. In this video I'll explain you firstly the difference between one-tailed and two-tailed test, and then we will see how to formulate hypothesis for one-tailed and two-tailed test. So starting with the difference, if I say one-tailed test, so one-tailed test of any statistical hypothesis where the alternative hypothesis is one-tailed, either right-tailed or left-tailed. That means I can say for the one-tailed test, generally we can identify the test that whether this particular test or hypothesis is for one-tailed or two-tailed. We can look at the alternative hypothesis, and looking at the sign we can understand that it is one-tailed or two-tailed test. Then talking about two-tailed test of statistical hypothesis where the alternative hypothesis is two-tailed. Usually, as I said, using the sign we can understand the difference. If alternative hypothesis is containing either the less than sign or greater than sign, then this is a one-tailed test. Or when the two-tailed alternative hypothesis is carrying not equal to sign, in that case this is a two-tailed test. Then I can say when the alternative hypothesis specifies the direction, then we use one-tailed test. And if no direction is given, then we will use the two-tailed test. Then critical reason lies entirely on either the right side or either the left side of the sampling distribution in case of one-tailed test. Whereas when we talk about two-tailed test, the critical reason will lies on both the tails of the sampling distribution curve. Then in one-tailed test, if I say the entire level of significance, that is alpha, maybe it can be 5% or any other percent, which it will lie on either left tail or right tail. When we talk about two-tailed test, the level of significance will be split into parts and will be fall on both the tails. Then rejection reason in case of one-tailed test will either lie on the left side or on the right side of the sampling distribution. Whereas in case of two-tailed test, the rejection reason will lie on both sides of the sampling distribution. In case of one-tailed test, it checks the relation between the variable in a single direction. But in case of two-tailed test, the relation between the variables will be checked in any of the direction. So this way, these are the differences of one-tailed and two-tailed test. Now, looking at the distribution of the data, also we can understand this thing. If your critical reason or the rejection reason is lies on both the tails, like this particular graph. So this is a case of two-tailed test. Similarly, if your rejection reason or I can say the critical value lies either on the either side of the tail, in that case it is called as the one-tailed test. So here we can see at the extreme left you can see the rejection reason is falling at the left side, and at the extreme right we can see the rejection reason is falling at the right side. So this way it is a case of one-tailed test. Now talking about the hypothesis. So usually looking at the hypothesis we can understand the one-tailed or two-tailed test. Firstly you can see very carefully here that here I am talking about firstly about the one sample test. One sample test meaning is when we are comparing the sample mean with the population mean, or I can say when we are comparing the population mean with some value. That is the case of one sample test. And in one sample test, if we are formulating our hypothesis as H0 or H0, mu is equals to X bar. And alternatively, if I am saying H1 is mu is not equals to X bar. That means looking at the alternative hypothesis, we can say this thing that here we are not clear. We are saying that the population mean is not equal to the sample mean. That means it can be either greater than or it can be either less than. But we are saying it is not equal to. So that is why this is the case of two-tailed test hypothesis. Now talking about the one-tailed test, in case of one sample test where we are comparing the sample mean with the population mean. So here there will be no difference in the null hypothesis. It will be same as the two-tailed test. But when we talk about the alternative hypothesis, that is H1, it can be H1 mu is less than x bar. That is, we are saying population mean is less than sample mean. So this is a case of left tail test. Here we are clearly mentioning the direction. Or we can say that mu is greater than x bar. Or we can say this thing here that the population mean is greater than sample mean. That is the case of right-tailed test. Similarly, if we talk about two sample test, in case of two sample test, we are comparing the means of two different samples. So here, in case of two-tailed test, our null hypothesis will be x naught, that is x1 bar is equals to x2 bar. That means both the sample means are equal, or I can say there is no significant difference in the means of both the samples. Alternatively, we are saying that x1 bar is not equals to x2 bar. That means there is a significant difference in the means of both the samples. So that means difference is existing, but in which direction it is existing, we are not mentioning that. So that is a case of two-tailed test. Talking about the one-tailed test, we can say x naught will be same as the previous, that is two-tailed test, that is x1 bar is equals to x2 bar. That means there is no significant difference in the means of both the samples. Alternatively, we are mentioning this, that is x1 bar is less than x2 bar. That means first sample mean is less than second sample mean. That means this is the case of left tail test. Or if we are saying that the x1 bar is greater than x2 bar, that is the first sample mean is greater than second sample mean. That means this is a case of right-tailed test. So friend, this way, looking at these things or these small things, we can understand that how we can formulate our null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis for one-tailed test and for two-tailed test, and also for one sample test and for two sample tests. So friends, I hope this video will help you to understand this difference. Thank you so much for watching this video. Stay connected for more such videos. Thank you.